FEMS Paint presents Wyvern Riders Through the Years. So you know game balance. What if we made a class that didn't care about that? Okay, so we might have gone a little too far. Let's just remove them and worry about fixing them next game. This broken class is so good, we're going to give you 5 promotion items for your 4 units to promote into it, just to be sure that you break the game with them. Okay, we're going to give you the strongest unit in the game, but she's not going to be recruitable until the end of the game, so you know it's fine if she breaks it wide open. So we're going to give you a Dragon Rider with really good stats. We're going to give him a personal weapon for no reason, even though he has no story significance. Oh, and you know how dismounting makes mounted units not as powerful? We're going to give him a perfect sword rank so that he doesn't care about that. You ever think about how funny it would be to give a level 8 unit capped strength? Okay, so maybe we went a little too far in the past. Let's make him a little balanced. Not great, not bad, good. You know, I really like what the last game did. Let's make another Wyvern Rider who's just good. Balanced, fine, a good unit, not a broken one. Ha! What if they were broken again? Okay, so maybe we went a little too far in the last 4 games. Let's dial it back. Let's make one that's decent. You ever think about breaking a game with 2 people? Alright, so you know how this class has broken open, like, the entire series? What if we let everyone become one? When you're part of a family in Fire Emblem, you've got a solid 50-50 on whether or not you're a super close, nice family unit, or a dumpster fire so bad a monsoon couldn't put it out. For every good family relationship like Erica and Ephraim, or Bartray and Fur, there's an absolute disaster like Guinevere and Zephiel, or Kellic and Leon. And this trend dates back to the very beginning of the entire series, as Marth has Elise, a kind, loving older sister, and the two are genuinely caring for each other and want what's best for the other. And the first game also has the 3 Macedon siblings, or tornado of betrayal, patricide, sacrifice, and a whole slew of other feelings that constantly conflict all 3 of them. And today, we'll be looking at the middle child, Fire Emblem's very first Wyvern Rider, the Crimson Princess Minerva. The Macedon siblings actually grew up completely fine. Michaelis was the cool elder brother, Minerva was the middle sister following eagerly in his footsteps, and Maria was the precious baby who was loved by everyone. They actually remained close for their entire childhoods. It wasn't until Michaelis grew up to be an adult that he decided, you know what? I want to be a fuckhead, and then he ruins everything. See, his father, King Osmond, was a man of character. When the big, bad, duller empire came to take over the world, they reached out to Macedon for military aid and were turned away. Michaelis wanted to accept the offer. He felt as though Macedon had enough power to rule over the entire continent, and a temporary alliance with Duller would prove advantageous to that conquest. Osmond refuses, though, and stands against the evil empire. But after a little bit of trickery from Garneth, Duller's resident cunt wizard, Michaelis is pushed to kill his father and take control of the kingdom for himself, now openly allying with Garneth and the Duller Empire. Needless to say, killing your dad tends to be a surefire way to get your siblings to hate you, but Michaelis blames his crime on Archanean assassins. This lie buys him enough time to take Maria hostage before Minerva can piece together that Michaelis is to blame, and because of that, Minerva is wrapped around his finger. If she tries to fight back against him, Maria's life will be placed in grave danger. So, Minerva's force of knights, the famous White Wings, are forced to help Michaelis' ambitions. And before we move on any farther in the story, I want to talk about the White Wings as a concept for a brief moment. I know Fire Emblem doesn't exactly have the greatest of track records when it comes to writing women, but I think the White Wings are really awesome, especially for the time period. One of the most famous knight groups on the continent of Archanea is an all-female group of powerful units. For 1990, that was pretty incredible for JRPGs. Sure, you had some female fighters. Dragon Quest in particular comes to mind with that, what with the Princess of Middenhall and such. But back then, women were kinda just something to save, a reward for completing your brave quest rather than their own characters. So seeing 4 powerful women form a group of knights, I don't know, I always thought that was pretty badass. Sure, they aren't like Wendell or Jagan levels of powerful, but to be fair, no one really is. Old men were definitely at their peak of power back on the NES, but they're all good units, and I just thought that was something that was really worth mentioning about them. With Maria under Michaelis' thumb, Minerva first appears as an enemy under control of a duller general, Harmain. Harmain is engaging in a very passive battle plan. He's deciding to wait for Marth to come to him. Basically, Harmain is turtling, and Minerva's playstyle is too unga-bunga to tolerate that pussy shit. Too prideful to engage the enemy in such a bitch-ass way, Minerva and the White Wings leave the battlefield, leaving Harmain to get bent by Marth's significantly more powerful army. This insubordination causes Dullard to realize Minerva might still betray them, even though they have Maria in their hands, so they split up the 4 White Wings to hinder their ability to coordinate. Turns out, they were right to do this, as Minerva now realizes Marth's strength and sneaks her soldier Catria over to tell him of Maria's plight, hoping he can save her and sever the chains that bind her to Dullard. And what do you know, Marth is a real G and helps Minerva do exactly what she wanted him to. Bust Maria out of prison, and with that, Minerva joins Marth's ranks. She wastes no time in kicking the ass of anyone in the enemy army, as she is a powerful unit right out the gate and one that 99% of people will use. Why? Well, that's easy. It's a very simple mathematical equation. Dragons equal cool. Remember that, it'll be on the test later. And remember, this is FE1, so the only way people really bonded with characters was as units. So Minerva being a cool unit meant most players were going to fondly remember her. And as such, you'll very rarely find an Arcanea fan who doesn't at least like Minerva, making her a very recognizable character for the franchise as a whole. But once she joins the player's army, she just fades into the background, never to be seen or mentioned ever again. I mean, this is Fire Emblem 1 after all. She doesn't have it as bad as someone like Thomas or Rad, but there's only so much FE1 gives to characters not named Marth or Malladus. Shadow Dragon doesn't give her much more, just a boss conversation when she clashes with her brother at the Macedon Palace. There, she gives him a chance to come back to her and fight on the side of good. Apparently, killing their dad wasn't as much as a deal breaker as one would think it is. However, Michaelis is just as stubborn and just as prideful as Minerva is, and he refuses to back down from his ambitions for the country of Macedon. The two have one final embrace, not into each other's loving arms, but into each other's spears, as Michaelis falls and leaves Minerva alone to pick up the shattered pieces of her nation. However, it's worth noting that while the people of Macedon were eager to crown her queen, Minerva had no desire to take the throne, only taking it temporarily since, with Michaelis dead, there wasn't really anyone else that could. In FE1, Minerva plays a bit part, but it's a very good bit part that leaves behind a memorable impression. But Arcanea is a two-parter. In FE3, Minerva shows that maybe her not wanting to take the throne was the correct decision, because as of 2 years after the end of FE1, she's overthrown by Macedon rebels who don't like the idea that Minerva's removing the corrupt generals and instead bringing peace and order to Macedon's nobility. She's saved from her death by her brother, who somehow survived FE1 because pretty much no major villain other than Joel actually stayed dead from that game. Minerva attempts to convince Michaelis to stop being a fuckhead, but Michaelis has no desire to stop being a fuckhead, so he fucks off, leaving Minerva behind to join Marth's army. As she joins, Marth remarks that Minerva still has to hold some love for her brother, as if she didn't, she wouldn't have spared him at the end of FE1, which again is apparently something that happened. Somehow. Before this video goes on any further, it's time to take that test. Don't worry, as long as you study for it, you'll be fine. Okay, here we go. The right answer is this one. That's right. The FEMS Paint patrons are the coolest people, because they give me money, and that automatically makes you cool. At least to me. For as little as $3 a month, you can join the FEMS Paint Patreon and get benefits like early access to videos, or, if you want to dish out the big bucks, access to polls that can decide future videos on the channel. Next episode, we're going back to FE4, and Arden has taken an early lead, but there's still a week left in the poll that could change at any second. My patrons include the likes of Andrew Crockett, Arctic Dusk, Atomic X160, follow Penta the North Star on Twitch, subscribe to Great Riek, Green Brigand, Hell on Heelys, My Anus is Bleeding, Keithan Coleman, Kieran Morin, Lightning Bolt, Me Do a Gamer, Memi, Michael Hamilton, Nember, Nevrix the Fallen Shield Guy, Ranger Man Sam, Rodolfo Flores Lopez, Ryan Walter, Space1255, Steph D, Tato, Anti-Ginger, Brentendo11, Dell, Drew Hack, Kazu Foxfire, Max, and Sazeki. Thank you all for your continued support, and let's get right back to Minerva. After Minerva joins Marth's army, she leaves the plot for most of the game. Yeah, you know, that classic Arcanea curse that I mentioned like 2 minutes ago. She doesn't even say a word during Michaelis' death, which one would think she would have something to say about, but alas, that's just not how these early Kage games work. Her last moment in the story comes at the very end of the game, as her sister Maria is under control of Garnef's mind control magic, and needs to be snapped out of her trance, lest she get vored by Medeus. Note to self, add vored by Medeus to list of sentences I am ashamed of saying. Minerva's scene with Maria does have a noteworthy bit of her lying to Maria about Michaelis' fate, as she tells her he's alright, and Maria is excited to have her happy family reunited after all these years of pain. One can assume Minerva lied because there's a goddamn giant demon dragon like 2 feet away from them, and it wasn't really the time to have a talk about death, but it still makes the scene hurt in all the right ways. Minerva's ending has her reject her right to rule Macedon, and instead opt to join Maria to work in Lena and Julian's orphanage, spending the rest of their days helping the children. I'm conflicted on this ending. On the one hand, a badass woman giving up her position of power does feel kind of not good, but on the other hand, it is true that Minerva never stated a desire to rule in the first place, so Minerva rejecting what society wanted for her and opting to do what she wants to do does have an empowering feeling as well. But really, I'm genuinely conflicted on this. I don't know if it's a good ending or a bad ending. However, regardless of how her ending makes you feel, it can't be ignored that Minerva is presented as a headstrong, powerful woman who's an icon in the series for a solid reason, combining kindness and power in a way that leaves behind a great character who doesn't feel too strong or too weak. She's human, with weaknesses and strengths that make her struggles feel more understandable and more relatable to anyone reading her scenes. But Fire Emblem 3 got a remake on the DS, and with that remake came the addition of support conversations for like 1/10 of the game's roster. Now that sounds like a dig at FE12, but honestly, I don't blame them. Have you seen how many goddamn characters are in FE12? I can't imagine making supports for all of them and all of them being good. But Minerva was one of the lucky ones to get a good amount of supports, knocking in supports with all 3 White Wings, Michaelis, and Chris, and in them, she's giving the wonderfully charming trait of crippling self-doubt. So, let's take a brief moment to dive into her supports and explore how New Mystery interpreted the fan favorite and made her into something a bit more dynamic than before. Minerva's supports really hammer in her thoughts that she is not worthy of the crown of Macedon, and in a more serious case, she doesn't even think she's worthy of being happy. Her supports with Chris, Paula, and Est have her vent about how she's been powerless during Macedon's infightings in both wars, and how her lack of competence led her kingdom to near ruin twice. The sense of failure has led her to be incredibly hesitant to compliments or gifts. Est tries to have her go on vacation with her to Valencia, recounting her fun time she spent there with Celica. Minerva refuses though, calling such a thing impossible, saying that she has to dedicate her life to absolving the sins of her failure, and that just the dream of happiness is enough for her. And with Chris, they try to talk Minerva out of her ways and remark on all of her good qualities, but even face to face with genuine praise, she refutes it, outright stating that she is not a good person and she deserves no praise. And truth is, you can kinda get where she's coming from. It is true that Minerva needed an outside hand to save her twice, and though she rose up and fought back both those times, it is a fact that she wouldn't have needed help were she better at ruling. But Minerva was betrayed by her brother and forced to comply in a hostage situation the first time. To me, that can hardly be seen as her being weak, more so Michaelis being cunning and cruel. And the second time, she was betrayed by the generals of her nation, sure, but she was a woman who had no training to rule and was forced to rule a whole-ass nation for 2 years. What could she have really done? It's unfair to herself for her to shame herself like this, but that's kind of how really bad cases of self-doubt work. The person sees their failures a lot more clearly than their successes. So while what Minerva's going through is sad to see, one can't say that it's not a very realistic experience, and in turn, a very relatable one. In a bit of a lighter support than that dour part, Katria asks Minerva why she decided to become a Wyvern rider, revealing that at one time in the past, Minerva rode a Pegasus instead. Minerva says that she opted for the Wyvern because Macedon was really only respected by other nations for its legion of Draco Knights, and as a royal family member, she decided to personally symbolize that might for the nation, and so she released her Pegasus into the woods and started riding a dragon herself. This scene is nice because it gives a bit of insight into how Minerva feels about her place as the nation's royalty, and it gives some world building to Arcanea as a whole. It also reveals that Pegasuses don't magically become wyverns when they promote, and instead they just get released for a dragon, though some Awakening and Sacred Stone supports would have you think otherwise. She supports with Michaelis too, but in my personal opinion, it's not very good. Not because of Minerva, mind you, but because of Michaelis. I personally think that Michaelis living in FE12 is a fundamental misunderstanding of what made his character in FE3 work, and I really don't like it. But that's a can of worms for a whole other discussion, so we're just gonna move on from that. I just wanted to acknowledge that her supports with him exist, so that you know I didn't forget about them. I just don't like to dwell on things I don't like for too long, so we're moving on. The final note I want to say about Minerva is that I like how she's an independent woman to the end. That is to say, she never ends up marrying anyone. And, don't get me wrong. I am an absolute sucker for romantic endings, and I will eat that shit up like popcorn, but not everyone needs a romantic ending. Est asks if Minerva has anyone she loves, thinking that a good dicking down will make Minerva feel a lot better about all that shit she's depressed about. Minerva says that there are, quote, gentlemen she appreciates, but to go so far as to call it love would be untrue, and that she doesn't even have the time to look for a man anyway. She tells Est that she'll give the idea some thought, but as her ending indicates, she ultimately remains single and finds fulfillment in the service of the orphans. In a sea of women who get married and go happily ever after, I like that Minerva is her own woman all the way through. It's just a nice little tidbit that helps her stand out more. All in all, while Minerva definitely suffers from Arcanea character writing, she suffers from it a lot less than most and manages to be a very engaging character. She has a tragic backstory, an interesting personality to delve into, and is a solid unit. She really just makes a complete package in just about every category. The tragedy of the Macedon family makes all three of them endearing characters in their own rights, but Minerva's brand of self-doubt and finding her own way is, to me, the most endearing of them all. So when you see Wyvern Riders breaking the game balance of pretty much every goddamn game in the series, just stop a moment and pay some respects to the original Queen of the Skies. Thank you guys very much for making it to the end of another character analysis video. This is episode 40. Yeah, the big 4-0. We might actually hit half 100 by the end of the year, and that is crazy. As always, I'd like to thank the Green Brigand for his constant support, looking over the script, and just being a cool guy all around. Thank you, as always. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave a like on the video, comment on the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, go to the Patreon or Discord, links in the description, and actually, let me know what you thought of the pacing of this video. I normally do a funny little end gag where I ask you something completely ridiculous, but I really want to know, how did the pacing work here? I decided to slow down how often I put panels up, and just slow the speed of things in general. I think it's still fine, let me know. Till next time.
Change the world. My final message.